Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and I get to go to Washington, D.C. now and visit an old friend, Barbara Wien. And I knew Barbara way back when she was, I think, maybe even an undergraduate. I'm not sure. Were you? No, you were a graduate student and all,
I
but
just graduated. I was a newly minted graduate, 21 years old.
way back when. And it was in an organization which we called COPRED, which, if I'm not mistaken, stood for Consortium on Peace Research, Education, and Development, right?
That's right.
And that went through many metamorphoses, changing names and titles and joining and disjoining various other organizations. Right now, I suppose the descendant organization is the Peace and Justice Studies Association, PJSA, right? Okay.
Yeah. We went through just 3 metamorphoses, and have arrived at Peace and Justice Studies Association. Yes, and the flame and the torch still carry on.
Perfect. And you are the main flamethrower, which is a good metaphor for a peaceful troublemaker.
Good trouble. Good trouble.
Right. Good trouble. Yeah. Okay. Barbara is a professor at American University in Washington, D.C. And I picked a fight with her before she was on this call. At 15 seconds, I said, you have to dig up that lawn and replace it with trees. But she's persuaded me that they are very responsible with their lawns at American University, and they have an excellent environmental program, and there are lots and lots of trees elsewhere on campus. So good for you, Barbara. You have started maybe 500 different programs in peace and conflict studies. So that is enough right there, if I don't say another word, that you went around, I think you were actually maybe hired or something when I first met you to travel around and set up peace and conflict studies programs at universities, I guess just in the US at that time. Was that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Uh-huh. And then you went on to higher things, or at least longer term appointments, such as the one you hold now at American University, but you've taught elsewhere. So what I want to talk to you about is the state of peace education, peace studies as an interdisciplinary discipline, if you will, at various universities in the world. And the ones I suppose you know the best are American universities, starting with American University, singular, right?
That's
okay,
right.
So tell me, if you will, let's start off by talking about today instead of the history. Tell me what you do nowadays, what your program is like, what your students are like, etc. What if you are probably Mrs. Peace Studies Professor of America, so you can put your crown on and tell me about what you're doing.
Well, peace studies is a shared enterprise and a very dynamic, innovative field. It's never stagnant, it's never dormant, it's ever evolving because the world is such a dynamic, evolving place. It's also a two-way street where students teach their professors every day the concerns, the challenges, the threats they see on the horizon. And so I love that my students are my greatest teachers. And as Khalil Gibran said, I'm not going to invite you to enter into my house of wisdom. I'm going to bring you to the threshold of your own mind. And this is what peace studies does, is to engage with students in a beautiful shared learning circle. And some of the great scholars and pioneers of the field taught me this. Elise Boulding, Betty Reardon, yourself, Meta Spencer, Hannah Newcomb, amazing people across the world that I have had the opportunity and the benefit of learning from. George Lakey with the Movement for a New Society, who's still going strong at 89 years old, and so many others. So it's a multi-generational practice. And we never just have our head in the clouds. We always have our feet on the ground. So the Peace Studies program at American University is a whole thematic area within our School of International Studies and School of International Service. It's called SIS, the School of International Service. And it's got currently about 248 students enrolled out of about, I think, 2,000 people in the school. So we are a substantial pillar in the scholarship. And then we also have a master's program in international peace and conflict resolution. We also have another master's program in global environmental studies and another master's program in international peace, human rights, and ethics, peace, and human rights. So you can really study peace, moral reasoning, higher methods of abstract thinking at American University. And we also have people studying peace at the PhD level. So I'm really, really blessed. It's a very vibrant, rich intellectual environment. People come from all walks of life, really, and we have diversified our faculty a lot. Thank God in recent years. It's not the old canon of international relations. We have younger, bright, strategic thinkers coming up through the ranks from Rwanda, from Ghana, from Palestine, from Latin America. We've established at the School of International Service a Center for Anti-Racism Research and Policy. I just feel so lucky to be teaching there. I get up out of my bed every morning so thirsty and so happy to go to campus. And of course, we're back together face to face now.
Oh, all right.
And I can get more into the intellectual content and substance of what we teach if you wish.
Okay, that's terrific. Now that's given me a wonderful view of American University. By the way, I had an offer to teach there once 50 years ago. And I also had offers from GW and what's the Georgetown. But I came to Toronto instead. Okay, let's talk about the overview of peace studies in the US now. Because I know that, I was pretty engaged with CoPrad and then when it became PSA briefly. But since then, I haven't been much involved with any of the organizational aspects of the discipline. And I like to call it a discipline because I remember there was a wonderful article by Ken Boulding ages ago saying that, peace studies could be a discipline. What does it take to be a discipline? Well, I think that one of the key things was you have to have a body of classical literature that you expect everybody to have read. All the people who become accredited in your field should be familiar with some of the same material. And then that means that you can give people exams in your field. And I think that it's really true that peace studies could be a different field from some of the related disciplines that exist now, like international relations and political science, because we do have a certain body of knowledge, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There are at least 36 journals in the field of peace education, peace studies, and peace research. We do have a core canon that we teach. We do have a lot more data and evidence and research since the 1950s when peace studies was born. We moved from small pacifist church-related colleges being the first wave of peace studies, which was really the moral reasoning that war was abhorrent. Mm-hmm. Then our great big project was trying to prevent nuclear war, and that was in everybody's best interest. But the field has really come a long way since then, thanks to feminist scholars. They infused a whole different paradigm shift into the literature and the scholarship. Saying that, domination over others is really the dominator model, this hierarchy where we seek to dominate nature, where we seek to dominate colonies, where we seek to dominate other races of people. That is not the feminist way of knowing, nor the indigenous way of knowing. We need power with others, not power over others. And thank goodness the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement began to propel the field into less top-down forms of solving international security problems. So it wasn't just world peace through world law. It wasn't just the importance of the United Nations and global governance and institutions, but it also was about the great civilizing movements of our day, the great other superpower, global civil society, which you know so well, Meta, because you convene us every Sunday night in a global town meeting. And so there are these huge meta analysis, meta frameworks, meta structures that we unpack in peace studies, and we look at what would a world without war look like. How would we defend our rights? How would we, protect our loved ones and our territorial integrity? And we examine all that, but we also look more and more at what people can be doing in their everyday lives, where millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people are working for peace at the local level. And that's where conflict resolution began to infuse and inform peace studies in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. That if we can reweave the social fabric at the local level, enhancing people's capacities and skills to resolve conflicts in their everyday lives, maybe we can also scale that up and convince people that we don't have to live with war. And so, again, it's a dynamic flow, give and take, going from the micro, the meso, the macro, the global. And we look at all those levels. And I would say that the new generation of peace studies very much embraces environmental peace, ecological peace. And this is where some of the scholars at the Peace and Justice Studies Association put out very important publications, like Randall Amster, who was heading up the Peace and Justice Studies Association for about 5 years. He really embraced the whole notion of ecological peace and what that would look like. The Gaia theory that, the world is a dynamic planet we're living on, and everything we do to the planet is reflected, in our own lives. Biomimicry, all of the environmental sciences are now better informing peace studies, but also the health sciences. We're now borrowing heavily from the epidemiologists, health through peace. How can we inoculate and vaccinate people against hate? How can we interrupt the transmission of hate? Using models from the health sciences. And of course, Médecins Sans Frontières, so many scientific medical groups have gone in and negotiated ceasefires and negotiated truces in an effort to vaccinate people against communicable diseases. So we're seeing more and more health organizations get together with peace studies also to try and stop gun violence in the United States. We're working with health professionals, and groups like Operation Ceasefire in Chicago was started by medical doctors, the Violence Interrupters, trying to use people that came out of violent environments or had been traumatized as children and went into the gang life or became prisoners and inmates, and they've come out and they're now community healers. So we've got the Alliance of Concerned Men and Peaceaholics and Violence Interrupters in Baltimore and Chicago and others that have experienced violence in society, both structural and overt violence, and they're now trying to be community peace builders. So they're wonderful examples for my students. We do a lot of work with Peace Jam. Peace Jam was started by Bishop Tutu in South Africa for Nobel Peace Prize winners to mentor the next generation of young people. So Nobel Peace Prize winners have formed an organization, and they go into the public schools and they mentor and scale up all the lessons from their lives living through war, living through genocide, to teach students how you can find a path out of such trauma and violence. Also, the Nobel Peace Prize women are working with young people around the world, especially young girls. And so I've done a lot of work with them, the Nobel Peace Prize women. So we have a lot of practitioners and Nobel Peace Prize winners in the field who are enriching our work. So I would say, different peace studies programs teach to their faculty strengths. So, Manchester College in Indiana might have more philosophy. Cal Polytech might have more on architecture, the architecture of peace, architects, designers, and planners for social responsibility. How can they contribute to peace? My school is more, in the field of international relations. So we look at peaceful relations among countries, how to de-escalate conflict, build up confidence, build up trust among nations. Every peace studies is going to have its own flavor, if you will, or own composition, depending on the expertise of the faculty.
Sure. Oh boy, that's a wonderful overview. Now, in terms of how many places are offering such programs in the U.S., I saw someplace that you had been involved with establishing 500 or so. How many?
380. Just correction, 380 programs.
380. Okay. Well, now where is this growing or diminishing now? Over the last 20 years, what have been the changes in this scale and the number of peace programs at American universities? Has it been growing or not? And how organized are they in terms of sharing intellectual resources? Do you visit and give talks in other universities and so on? What's the organizational lay of the land in the U.S. with respect to peace studies now?
Well, not just in the U.S., but overseas as well. I'm in touch with, through the Global Campaign for Peace Education, Tony Jenkins and Betty Reardon and others, Laura Findley, actually took stock of the peace studies programs in the last 5-6 years. They did surveys and polling among them. So enrollments are on the rise all over the world. And the years when the United States was invading Iraq and Afghanistan, people became very, very involved, concerned, engaged, and upset. Mm-hmm. And our enrollments went way, way up. And at the graduate level. So it depends very much of what you're talking about at the graduate or undergraduate level. I'm sorry to report that when Trump took the Oval Office, enrollments at the graduate level went down because some people thought that this was a major signal that the State Department would be diminished, international diplomacy would be diminished, peace would be diminished. So people seeking professional careers at the graduate level were more reticent to enter the field. That now has changed again. And our enrollments are more robust at the graduate level. We're doing very, very well. I will say that higher education in general is experiencing declines because of the pandemic, because of student debt, because of unemployment. So we've seen that enrollments in colleges and universities in the United States have declined 13% in the last 2 years since the pandemic hit. That's very disturbing. And at the community college level, which is much more affordable and accessible, enrollments are down 22%. So there's a context here, there's a backdrop. Many people were thrown out of work, or they had the realization they couldn't be burdened with so much student debt. I have not seen the evidence, and I don't have the data of how this has affected peace studies per se. Mm-hmm. So I don't really want to speak to that in the current context. I don't know that enrollments are suffering in peace studies in the same manner. And I don't know what's happening with enrollments in higher education in Canada and other countries. But the long-term trends have been that our enrollments are up, the number of programs are up. Georgetown's certificate program morphed into a minor and is now a major at Georgetown. They have a major in peace studies, peace, justice and peace studies. And that's my understanding of the trend at other colleges and universities, that they are highly organized, and they demand a lot of respect on campus. They're no longer fighting a rearguard action, trying to defend the discipline. They're not apologetic about the discipline. We've been established enough. There's enough literature, scholarship, and data to show that war is not making us safer. And if anything demonstrated that, it's Afghanistan.
Sure.
So as you know, the United States hasn't won a major military victory since World War II, even though we have the largest military by a factor of 10 of any other countries in the world. So if a huge military armaments and drones and spending and wars made us safer, we would have the evidence to support that. And I think young people realize the gig is up. After Afghanistan and Iraq, they're not buying the war paradigm anymore.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Well, now, I organized a peace and conflict program at my campus of the University of Toronto back in the 80s, and I ran it for about 15 years until I retired in 1997. And they closed the program immediately, which, in fact, I didn't object to. No. I think it was at the end of the Cold War. It was the Soviet Union had come apart, and people, it was a strange period, because I think more generally peace studies was not taking off anymore at the end of the 90s at that point. And I didn't object that they closed it, because I was afraid that the people who would be keeping it going, the administration of the university, would probably hire somebody who didn't know anything about peace studies, just say, well, anybody, with a degree in sociology or political science can teach peace. But of course, that's not the case. And I didn't want it to be taught badly. So I wasn't upset that they closed it. I'd rather have it down than do a bad job. But still, now that you're telling me that there is a restoration, a reviving of peace studies more generally in universities, I'm very glad to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't even say that it's reviving, but it never went away, and that's the lesson for me, that it is this steady, strong, clear light in the world, and it is such a strong presence in so many people's lives, and it inspires them, it compels them, it offers a vision of the future that's very, very uplifting for young people. So at the end of the 1990s, when your program was closing down, was the golden age of peacekeeping. And the United Nations had 21 peacekeeping missions fanned out across the world. And the data shows, and the record shows, that they were able to stop civil wars and the spread of violence in many parts of the world. They didn't always do it right. They did a lot of mistakes, including sexual violence against women, where UN peacekeepers served. But they had a quelling effect. They were under-resourced. They didn't have clear missions. They had conflicting mandates. The Security Council was arbitrary about where these peacekeepers were deployed. They got conflicting signals. But in places like Sierra Leone, they did it right, and they helped bring the end of the civil war. Then we began to see waves and waves of nonviolent struggle, and all the colored revolutions, and the orange revolution, and the purple revolution, and the cedar revolution, and the singing revolution, and Serbia with the Otpor students. And there was a whole new wave of peace studies looking at nonviolent struggles around the world as a way of waging conflict without bloodshed, resisting humiliation, resisting dictatorships. And of course, the Arab awakening, the Arab Spring in North Africa and the Middle East was a huge watershed period for peace studies. Now, despots and regimes and dictators and authoritarian governments around the world all borrow from each other's playbook and all read from the same, authoritarian toolkit. And they massively push back on these nonviolent struggles. And they've cracked down, and they have 70,000 political prisoners in Egyptian jails, and probably even more in Turkey. And of course, Syria happened, and we invaded many places and broke all the china in the china shop. But nonviolence also propelled the field in new and different ways. And Erica Chenoweth's and Maria Stefan's research was also a huge watershed, where they crunched the numbers as skeptics around nonviolence. They were narrowly trained as political scientists, and they were like, what is this BS called peace studies and nonviolence? It doesn't work. And then they came back with the quantitative evidence that actually nonviolence has succeeded 56% more times than violent struggle in the world. So when your program shut down, we were in a very interesting place where the UN had a resurgence of peacekeeping missions, and we had waves and waves of nonviolent struggle. So I'm sorry your program shut down, because it would have been an interesting time when you should have mentored your successor. Don't let things end, because it's still going. It's still going. The world is so exciting and important. And, the Chinese sign for crisis is also opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we are now going to be going through a huge energy revolution in the world. Mm-hmm. If you don't transition to green energy, you are going to be left behind. The train is pulling out of the station. And if we move to green energy, we'll end our dependence on fossil fuels and oil and gas. And those authoritarian regimes in the Middle East are going down. They're going down. They will collapse because they will not have the benefit of petrodollars. And I was very glad to see that you appointed the new Green Jesus as your environmental minister in Canada, the Greenpeace activist.
Right.
Now bravo.
Right.
But we have to protect the Native people of Canada. The Wet'suwet'en people are being decimated by oil and gas pipelines, just like we're trying to do to the Native American people in the United States. They're the canary in the coal mine. If these pipelines are built and all that methane gas escapes, there's not going to be a planet to protect anymore. So am I pronouncing the name of the tribe?
I think so, but I have trouble with it too. they put hyphens, or rather they put commas or
apostrophes. Yes,
apostrophes in the middle of sentences, and
follow their struggle very closely. The women have hung red dresses in the woods, on the trees, for all the indigenous women who have disappeared from these man camps.
Yeah.
From these big oil rigs,
right,
and
yes, right.
So many.
Yes, that's really one of the baffling things, is the number of indigenous women who've been disappeared. It's really astounding. Anyway, I don't want to go there yet, because I want to ask about your
or killed. Yeah, they've been trafficked or killed.
Yes.
And nobody's looking for their bodies. The same thing happens in the United States, and also along the Texas-Mexico border with the maquiladoras and the factories down there. Right. Hundreds of Mexican American, Guatemalan women disappeared. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody searches for them. Where are they taken? What's happened to them? This is a central component of peace studies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to ask about students, because here's the problem that I was experiencing when I was teaching. My students never became peace activists. Now, the closest they came was during the beginning of the Iraq War, when and my feeling is this: they themselves organized. I didn't do it. They organized. And that was, I think, the thing. University students are at an age when they are trying to become independent. And all the peace groups that I belong to keep trying to recruit students or young people in as if they're going to take over. that's not the way it works. The students that I knew, if they become active, they do it as their own organization. They create their own movements. And it may not last, but for a certain period of time, as for example, during the first Iraq War, they were very engaged. They took over I had a 2-room office with a Peace Resource Center, and they would meet there every day and have their big meetings and organize rallies and things like that. So I didn't do it. So I think that was the thing. So if you want to get students involved, I think it needs to be student-led and student-run NGO, so to speak. But also, I think the reason that I was disappointed in the fact that the students simply never became activists in any permanent way or ongoing way was, I think it's caused by the fact there were no jobs in peace studies, and the students had to be looking out for a career. Now, I wonder whether nowadays there are more, of course, you're in Washington, D.C., where there really are jobs, presumably, at least from time to time, in various governmental agencies and probably NGOs as well. But it seems to me that unless there is a clear career line for people enrolling in peace and conflict studies, they might as well be studying, ancient Greek or something, that in terms of you're not going to get the same attitude of permanent engagement that you might if you could see that a program was leading into a particular career. As for example, an engineering program is definitely going to lead you into a career in engineering, but that's not the case with peace studies. It wasn't then. Tell me how it is now. What are the students like now that you're encountering, and what is their notion of their own future roles? Do you see a role for graduates of peace and conflict studies? And are there jobs waiting to be filled?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you had that experience with your students. That's not been my experience at all. I don't ask them to be activists, but I build it into my classes. So they get credit in my courses for partnering with a community-based peace organization, peace network. They are working actively in Washington, Maryland, and Virginia in the district to bridge over their lessons learned, their theories, the concepts from our classes into real world peace building at the local level. And that I think makes it easier for them to actually apply and practice peace studies, is if you incentivize it and build it in as a community-based learning component. And American University is very big on that. So is Georgetown, so is GW, many universities, because students are having to work. They need, to take 6 classes or 5 classes. So it's hard for them to also do activism in addition to all of that. But if you build it in as part of the course credit, they get a taste of it, they get inspired by it, they get highly motivated and galvanized. But I would say the opportunities are limitless in the field of peace studies. And I want to get outside of Washington, D.C. I don't want to use Washington as the showcase or the example, but I will get back to that in a minute. At the micro levels and at the community levels, graduates of peace studies are advancing communal approaches to peace. They're doing large-scale dialogues in their communities. They often work for the municipal government in their cities and towns on restorative justice, on peacemaking circles where there may have been injury in the town. They are working on community police relations to de-escalate violence, hold police accountable in civilian oversight boards. They're working in professional mediation societies and associations. They are also serving in the schools as peace educators, kindergarten through 12th grade. There are many jobs that are posted on the listserv of the Peace and Justice Studies Association. So, for instance, Eastern Mennonite University is looking for 4 tenure track faculty in their peace studies program currently. American University has advertised 5 tenure track jobs in our School of International Service, which is required also to morph over into peace. Westchester State University up in Pennsylvania also just advertised tenure track jobs in peace studies. This is going on all over the country. So in both higher education and K through 12, people are looking for those who can infuse peace concepts, classroom management. We have teacher training institutes now in many parts of the world. And again, Tony Jenkins and Betty Reardon have kept that going, and that listserv has grown. We also have things like the Earth Charter. They're working in at least 80,000 schools around the country, headquartered in Costa Rica, 80,000 schools around the world, infusing ecological peace, the Earth Charter, into education.
Sorry, what group is that that's
the
doing
Earth
that?
Charter, the Earth Charter, it's was born in 92, 94. This is the motto of the Earth Charter. Here's the motto of the Earth Charter. I don't know if you can see it, probably not on
Hold it up high in front of your face.
Yeah. Can you see
no,
it?
it's funny.
Okay, I'll read it to you. A global citizen accepts all people, protects the earth, helps those in need, and works for peace.
Mm-hmm.
So the Earth Charter, 2 of my students have been hired by the Earth Charter in Nicaragua and Costa Rica to spread environmental peace.
Mm-hmm.
So the prospects are limitless. Now in Washington, D.C., our faculty, particularly Chuck Call, helped to establish a new bureau within the State Department on conflict mitigation and stabilization. This is to help countries who are recovering from war so they don't lapse back into violent conflict and bloodshed. So it's a whole new bureau that Chuck Call and Rick Barton and others in the State Department have established. And they help countries that are fragile, that might re-erupt into war.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just one agency. Of course, the United States Institute of Peace has grown, and their funding has grown, and their composition and complexion has changed dramatically since when.
Well, tell me about that, because you were there and you did not feel happy with it, right? When you
that
were
was
there.
The old guard. That was the old school.
How long ago was that?
Yeah.
And what happened?
That was Dick Solomon. Well, they were very hesitant to get ahead of the State Department and the Pentagon and Congress for fear of losing their funding. So they often, walked around with their tail between their legs. Mm-hmm. Whereas their motto was to strengthen the nation's capacity to resolve conflicts nonviolently. And I took that seriously. I took that to heart. I was part of the grassroots movement with Elise Boulding that challenged us to establish an Academy for Peace, because we had the National War College, West Point, the Naval Academy, many, many military training programs in high schools and colleges. Why couldn't we have an Academy for Peace? So I really took the motto of the U.S. Institute of Peace to heart, saying we have to strengthen our nation's capacity to resolve conflicts nonviolently. But they didn't always see it that way, the old management. Mm-hmm. They have now passed away. May they rest in peace. And a new generation of people took over, particularly Nancy Lindborg, who came out of Mercy Corps and the humanitarian field. And that's a whole nother job branch for young people, for careers. The humanitarian organizations need people with conflict resolution and peace skills, and they hire all the time. Save the Children, Mercy Corps, Catholic Relief Services, Interaction, all of them hire people with peace studies degrees. So she took over the U.S. Institute of Peace, and she really changed it. Women make a difference. She hired Maria Stefan to advance nonviolence. They have a whole program on civil disobedience, civilian-based defense, like Gene Sharp taught us, civil resistance. I think Maria Stefan has left recently, but boy, did they generate a ton of excellent
By the
seminar.
way, I saw a year or so ago that the ICNC, Peter Ackerman's organization, was going to be moving into a building that I guess I guess it was there all along. It's an ugly building attached to the most beautiful building in the world. I think the U.S. Institute of Peace is just a spectacularly gorgeous building, but then right next to it, I guess it's part of it, there's this big squat, ugly building, and I gathered that is actually part of the outfit, and that ICNC was going to move in there. Is it? Tell me about that. Has that
Yeah,
happened?
I can't really speak to that. The building you're talking about is the Naval Annex, and the Navy donated all that land to the U.S. Institute of Peace as
Oh,
long as they could maintain an underground parking garage. So that's the Naval Annex you're talking about, and the U.S. Institute of Peace has connected their beautiful building through glass corridors to that other annex. I use the materials from the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict, Peter Ackerman, Hardy Merriman, all of the staff there in my classes all the time. Their films are fantastic. For those in your listening audience who are not familiar with the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict, ICNC, you can watch all of their films for free. They're available online in over 12 languages, and they advance the notion that we can resist humiliation, wage conflict nonviolently, and give birth to a new social order that's not based on war. All of their films depict actual nonviolent struggles around the world that have succeeded, and they explain why. And I really want to commend Nonviolence International as well, Mubarak Awad and David Hart and Michael Beer. They took seriously Hardy Merriman's responsibility to assist a new international doctrine, not the responsibility to protect like the UN Security Council enacted, but a responsibility to assist is a new international doctrine. Instead of sending drones and military, let us strengthen the nonviolent protagonists, the nonviolent campaigners inside a country, build up their capacity through literature, scholarship, training, skills building, as the State Department did with the Otpor movement, and help them prevail over a repressive regime. And so Michael Beer, Hardy Merriman, Steve Zunis at the University of San Francisco, Mubarak Awad and others strengthened the capacity of the Sudanese to wage struggle against al-Bashir. And they brought down their military dictator after 30 years, and they painted a beautiful mural in Khartoum thanking the Western nonviolent networks and nonprofits that helped them prevail. Now, of course, we see this terrible military coup happening in Sudan. So this is always the case where those who want to cling to power, those with toxic forms of militarism, want to crush the nonviolent spirit. I don't think it's going to be so easy in Sudan. They've been at this a long time, trying to undermine the pillars of support of the military in Sudan. The civilians, I think, will ultimately prevail, not just in Sudan, but in other parts of the Middle East. Mm-hmm. So I want to take off my hat and really give a lot of kudos to the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict and Nonviolence International for being in true solidarity as true allies and strategic partners with nonviolent struggle campaigns around the world, not in an imperialistic way, but in a respectful way when invited. Mm-hmm. And that's
there's a whole issue there, because I've never teased it apart quite in order to set it up as a controversy, one side versus the other, but it almost is. I have friends who are peace workers who would say that NGOs maybe should take the risk of going into another country and helping the dissidents stand up against their regime, but that no government should be involved in doing anything that would interfere with the sovereignty of any other government. Even if you don't like them, you shouldn't be going in and trying to interfere. So the U.S., of course, was very offended about, quite rightly, the interference of Russian trolls, really trying to disrupt the U.S. election and change the course of the outcome. And then they say, well, that's the principle that they're invoking, that no country should ever be interfering with the rights of the other country. Well, here's where I'm stuck, because I as a person am very frequently on the side of the dissidents in opposition to an oppressive regime, and I would do and I feel it's my responsibility, it's a duty to help them. And therefore, my inclination is to hope that my own government will also help them. But there's the rub.
Yeah. Well, I think you're mixing apples and oranges a little bit. But first of all, let me just say that the United States interfered with elections all over the world since 1954 or even before. So we helped to overthrow and depose a lot of democratically elected governments around the world, like Arbenz in Guatemala and Mossadegh in Iran. And that set the stage for other countries to interfere. So when you break all the China in the China shop and you bend the rules of the international order and you interfere in the affairs of other countries, you set the stage for other countries to do it to you. So what goes around comes around. That's one type of interference that erodes democratic principles, erodes the rule of law, disrupts the will of the people. I am certainly not advocating for any of that. I worked for an organization for 5 years that was born on Grindstone Island in Canada, established by Quakers, Gandhian disciples, and Buddhists, and it's called Peace Brigades International. And Quakers have taught me you have to wait to be invited. So activists write to peace brigades, nonviolent peace force, the Friends peace teams, and 14 other like-minded organizations and say, come, please walk with us in our villages, stand with us side by side. So when the death squads come, we will be protected. And it works. And I've done it. And Peace Brigades International has been around now for over 35 years, established in 1981 in Canada. Thank God. The Canadian government gives them money, the Canadian labor unions, the Quakers, and 70 other sources of funding. But we have to be petitioned to go. We have a very careful methodology. It's over 50 pages long. If we go, will we put the locals at greater risk? Can we stay for a very long time? Because we cannot just parachute in, think we're the great white saviors and then leave. No. Peace Brigades has been in Guatemala for over 30 years, and it does save lives. The data and the evidence shows that the presence of internationals has a quelling effect. Whether it's international human rights observers from the European Union, from the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, or whether it's from a ragtag group like Peace Brigades International that is so grassroots and so small scale. The Otpor students asked for help in Serbia. They were students, they were just a ragtag group of kids in shorts out in the Yugoslavia countryside. The Sudanese activists asked for help from these NGOs. That's very different.
Wait a minute. Didn't they also get money from the U.S. State Department, from some government agency? There's where the issue comes in. I think many people would say that NGOs should, or at least should be allowed to, or have every reason to do things of that kind. But should a government actively
did not go straight from the State Department to the Otpor students? This money went through the International Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute. And what they did was to train the students in electoral organizing, how to register people to vote, how to build a coalition with opposition parties to get a unified front. My husband worked for Freedom House for many years. That was established by Eleanor Roosevelt to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They got money from the State Department to get 700 homosexual men out of Chechnya before they were skinned alive and tortured and imprisoned. And they had this whole program called Lifeline. And so that, I think, is money well spent when invited. So we're not like the US Marines that just invade. You have
Yes,
to
but
be
no, still, I mean, sorry, Barbara, but invited by whom?
by the homosexual man, by the homosexual.
Obviously, the dictators don't invite people in who are
Right.
out to try to depose them.
Yeah.
And it's a question of, if you're invited in by dissidents, should you go? And does that give you any, what does international law say about interfering in the activities
Well,
of another?
there's a long history of this. The Quakers first went into northern China when there was a huge famine in 1923. That was the first
Yeah,
nonviolent.
we're talking NGOs, though. We're talking non-governmental
Yeah, the
organizations.
Quakers are non.
But the question is, what about the government? What is the
I don't
situation?
yeah, no, the government should not be involved. But there's a
But
very
if they fund it, they're involved.
yeah, there's a very blurred line there because, for instance, Peace Brigades International is inside the Swiss Parliament. Their offices are funded by the government of Switzerland. Peace Brigades Canada is funded by your government, yet it saves lives. So, you know, we can be holier than thou. We can be purist as much as we want to. We can have paralysis through analysis. But when activists are asking for our help, and Canadian Peace Brigades people deploy and it saves lives, I'm not going to oppose that. The German Peace Service is funded through the German government, and it has.
You and I have the same values. I think we believe the question is who you're helping. Are you helping people get free, or are you helping people oppress other people? But no, that's not your issue.
People I know are not helping to oppress other people. They're helping to stop the bloodshed through the strengthening.
No, but I'm saying that if you're, as I understand it, the international norm now is that no government should try to interfere with any of the workings of another state. So when China gets very very huffy, their claim is always.
I understand the debate, Meta. I understand the debate, but you're going down a rabbit hole because that's not what these NGOs are doing. They're not stepping and fetching for the governments. They might.
No, but honey, I'm not saying they are. The problem is I'm trying to establish the legal principle that would give them the right to do exactly what they're doing. As of now, I think there is kind of an argument, if not an actual international norm, saying that that no country receiving money from its own government, I mean, no NGO, such as the Quakers, let's say, that if they receive money from their own government, they are not right to go interfere with anything going on, let's say, in China.
Most governments are going to say that. They don't want to be deposed. So, yeah, if they are so democratic and they're so beloved by their people, these teams would not be necessary. I thought you were going to make a different argument, which was white supremacy, like the white savior complex, where we think we have to go in and save the lives of brown and black people in the global South. If we would stop spending so much on armaments as the number one weapons dealer in the world, as the number one exporter of torture devices, these nonprofit organizations and NGOs wouldn't even be necessary in the first place. 47% of all weapon sales going to the Middle East are from the United States. So I want to put pressure on my government, which I do every day, to cut off weapon sales, cut off torture devices, stop funding and fueling the wars in different parts of the world, and backing the Khalifi government in Bahrain, the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia. These nonprofit organizations like Peace Brigades International, like the Quakers, wouldn't even be necessary if we were not fomenting militarism in other parts of the world. So no, I think it's a false debate. It's the wrong debate to be having. If small scale assistance to the Sudanese nonviolent protagonists is so morally wrong because it breaks some kind of international norm, that Michael Beer and Mubarak Awad and Hardy Merriman helped the people in Sudan, then I disagree with you. I think they should.
Well, honey, I don't think you're understanding me. You're not disagreeing with me because we agree. I think we absolutely agree on what is ethically the right to do, and that we ourselves support. But as I understand it, the ICNC has a book called something like The Right, not the responsibility, but the right to assist.
Now,
That every
now it's called the responsibility to assist.
well,
it's called the responsibility to assist, and they've been doing it, and it works.
okay. Now, my friends in Russia, if any Russian NGO receives money from let's say the US or Canada or Europe, any outside outfit, those people are labeled spies. And they can be jailed for being spies because they are working for an outside organization. Now, what I'm arguing for, and this is my point, not what you think I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that there should be established that we have every right to support and assist the people who, let's say in Russia or China or anywhere. Today it would even be in India, who are maybe operating against their own government, opposing their own government. That a foreign country does not in itself have any duty to keep hands off when it comes to another state. So by funding the Quakers or any of these other outfits to go and do the right thing, Mubarak Awad's outfit, by funding them, as of now, they are any government that funds them is putting itself in opposition to an international norm, and that's what I'm saying should not be allowed.
That's why they don't take any government money. Peace Brigades International in the United States doesn't take any U.S. government money. Quakers don't take government money. Nonviolence International doesn't take any government money. It's all grassroots, mostly funded by.
But Otpor did, let's say.
Otpor got secondary funding through another agency, just like Freedom House gets U.S. government money from USAID to help save the lives of LGBTQ folks in other countries. Yeah, it's twice removed. The funding is twice removed. It's funneled through nonprofits. Yeah. I would like that to be the use of my tax dollars, but I don't think that that's the only equation. I think we have to think outside the box. These efforts would not be necessary if we would stop funding wars, regional wars and conflicts around the world. So let's cut off the military budgets that are fomenting a lot of these crises in the first place.
Sure.
Okay, I think our time is up and I need to leave to go teach.
All right.
It's been good to talk.
What's your course? What are you teaching this next hour?
I teach nonviolent struggle in theory and practice. I teach gender and peace building, peace, global security, and conflict resolution.
All in 1 hour?
No, there are multiple hours. Thank you for your time today. Have a good day.
Okay, it's been fun. Thank you so much, Barbara. Bye.